don't believe in work-life balance. I think that what I choose to do with my work needs to be aligned with the thing that I would want to be doing. I'm showing up at your literal doorstep, unannounced, unsolicited, asking you to give me money on a regular basis for nothing in return.
Hold. I'm starting to see where she may have developed some of this audacity.
I had to acknowledge that I'm not pizza. I can't make everyone happy. Proceed until apprehended is a very real strategy in life.
Is that something that you feel like you've had to work on then?
I think there's
Welcome to Women Who Lead. This is the podcast that I wish I'd had when I was a woman in leadership just starting out. So my friends, I have done you a big favor. I have selected some of the most inspiring women in leadership, and I've assembled them in a series of conversations where they're going to share their tips, tricks, frameworks, stories, everything to support you to bloom into the next season of your career. Today, I am with the most effervescent soul, Emily Lincoln Gordon. Welcome.
Hi.
I am so happy to have you here because this really is a podcast. Well, it's called Women Who Lead for a start. But what I wanted to do most was really bring to the world conversations with very authentic, but very down to earth and very realistic women in leadership. And my darling, that is you all over.
Oh, thanks. Mm-hmm. What a lovely thing to say about someone.
First of all, diving right in, I would love to know, what does it mean to you to be in bloom in work and in life?
I think it's a thing about alignment. I think especially when you're a woman, there is a lot of expectation placed upon you other than just your career. It's the whole, aren't you going to have kids? Will you, won't you? Must you not get married? My mother is Asian, so there's like a whole additional layer of expectation. Both professionally, it was like lawyer, doctor, accountant, etc. And then it was like, must have kids, must do this, must do that. I don't have kids. I was a lawyer. I no longer do that. And so it's kind of the in bloom thing for me is more about, it's taken me age to do it. And I have hopes for women of generations to come that it won't take them until their 30s and 40s to reach that stage. I think that that's a generational thing. I think it's the shedding of what other people want for you and really working out what is it you want to do and spend all of your time on, and then going after those things in quite a relentless but resourceful way, I think is the way I think about it. It's like, am I spending most of my time doing stuff that I wouldn't change? Am I wishing I'm somewhere else? I mean, you can't get it right all of the time, but most of the time I would like the answer to be, no, I'm exactly where I want to be, doing what I want to do with the people I want to do it with.
Yeah.
I think that for me is what it means.
That's big because alignment is huge. But there's something that you just said there that I'm sure will resonate with lots of people, which is all about, really other people's expectations of us. And you're talking about like family expectations, what career you were expected to go into. I'm curious because for people who are watching this who are like, I just kind of did what I was told, honestly, how did you break away from that and reinvent yourself into, I guess, a more authentic version of who you are?
One big thing is therapy. I think like spending time with a person who mirrors back to you what you're saying. And like, I don't think therapy is a silver bullet. I think a lot of people talk about it that way. I think finding the correct therapist was a big thing for me. I went through like 17 or something for one session each. Like, nope. Until I found someone where I was like, okay, you're legitimately going to challenge what I'm saying and challenge my bullshit and be like, do you mean what you're saying? Are you just saying that? And it's not undoing. A therapist can't fix you, but a therapist can hold up a sort of a mirror to you and say, I heard you say this. What does that really mean? Do you need help working through what that means? Where did it come from? And it's just sort of being able to label and identify why I am the way I am and why I feel the need to live up to certain standards. And I think there's a bunch of stuff there. There's the macro stuff, like what profession should I have? Shouldn't I have a family? Must I get married? All of those societal things. That's like the macro lens. And I think then there's the micro lens that you have to work on. You know this very well, given the jobs that you've done in the past. You show up to a professional environment. Often it is pretty male dominated, but even if it isn't, I think women are just as harsh to each other. There is an expectation that you be soft and you be accommodating and you be like a certain amount of feminine in the way that you show up. That has never been my style. And so I've forever felt the need to explain myself or adapt or like be someone else for the first 6 months and slowly get you used to the way that I really am. And I think for me, the journey was like, once I got to a place in one of the jobs that I was in for 4 years where I was showing up as myself fully every single day, I was speaking the way that was natural to me. I was writing that 3-line email. I wasn't saying, hi, it would be so nice if you could. I was writing emails the way that, they should be intentionally received regardless of my gender because I was so comfortable there. I realized how much that fulfilled me, being able just to be myself. And I think that when you're putting those two things together, the like professional journey of like, hey, I've stopped caring about whether or not you do or don't want me to be soft because no one was asking me to. That was a wonderful place to work. And then you're also doing therapy on yourself, figuring out like, what are the things I do that maybe I wouldn't do if I really thought about them? It was, for me, the journey of those two things happening at the same time was just very fortunate. And also getting into your 30s. People stop asking you at some point whether you're going to have kids or not. And I think that that is also a realization that like, actually there's no consequence. Nobody really cares. And I wish I'd known that sooner. That actually people ask things of you, but how do you weight how committed people are to what they are implicitly or explicitly asking of you? And as it turns out, often not very. It means more to you than it does to them.
You know, we don't know that though, do we? And as we're growing up, what we're hearing is actually a lot of scaremongering.
Absolutely.
You know, like you're running out of time, you need to do this, you need to get on with it, you need to do, you know, all of these different things that makes us think that we're always slightly behind.
And I think that there's an active pressure there from society in general that if you're not going to do that, well, you must really excel in your career then. Because you have to win somewhere to prove your value. Because as women, by default, we are not valuable. Men are. My biggest hope, and the reason that I talk about it so openly with so many people and start Table A and all of that stuff, is because there's a whole generation of women coming up where I really hope they don't wait until they're 30-something to work this out.
Absolutely. And you work as obviously a COO today. But tell us a bit about Table 8, just because you mentioned it there. And I do want to call out the amazing stuff that you're doing with Table 8.
So it's a small group of women, all of whom are operators in startups, tech businesses, etc. in London, just because it shares a commonality that maybe corporates don't so much. They're all sort of C-suite or C-suite adjacent roles, people who are hugely responsible for something in the business. And they're all women who, as an additional dimension, don't mind being a bit outspoken about stuff. It's not for women who would prefer to sit back and let things happen. It's for the women who want to have an opinion, for example, on Roe v. Wade, etc. It's a sort of safe place for people to come, and we talk about like, is my boss a narcissist? Is he not? How do I deal with that? What's it like being a woman at work? What unique issues do we face? Because I don't think it's worth us not acknowledging it. I think it is really annoying to the outside world that we're always banging on about how it's different to be a woman. Fair enough. But it is our lived-in experience, and there are lots of things that we can learn from each other in terms of pattern recognition. So getting those folks together and giving them a sort of a place to say, hey, this thing happened. Anyone had this? How do you deal with that? I think it's really, really valuable. Also, they're just kick-ass women, and I'm selfishly just like hanging out with them.
I mean, they are fantastic.
Aren't they?
Yeah?
Yeah, they are. You know, you came along. Yeah,
I do. I was lucky enough to do a session with you, and we were talking about it through the lens of masculine and feminine energy, right? Because we all have both within us to a different degree. And what happens is we find ourselves feeling like we live into something that maybe isn't really who we are, a bit like what you were saying, you know, maybe you're having to soften your approach. Whereas I think in my own case, I was sort of living more in the masculine energy and then actually really needed to invite my feminine energy in. For me, my feminine energy has been about learning to be affectionate to the truth of myself.
Yeah.
And to therefore be able to show up more fully in the soft and the strong. And I wonder, is that something that you feel like you've had to work on then? Or, you know, like what's your relationship with that been?
I think it's almost the opposite to yours. I think that might be role specific as well.
Yeah, maybe.
I came up as a lawyer, then I went in-house as the only lawyer to several businesses, and it's sort of like the fun police job, and there's a huge tension there with businesses to be able to say clearly what it is that is permitted and isn't permitted. It's quite a hard and strict line role as opposed to the sort of the people role where a lot of it is like much softer and much more nuanced, and the consequences are very different. And I think that the thing that I've had to unlearn is feeling like I have to over-explain or feeling like I have to apologize for having the, in the nicest way, correct opinion because it's based on some expertise or some legal aspect. And then later as a COO, it's like there are certain ways that you do or don't run organizations. There are certain rules around how you do or don't do financial stuff. And some of these are quite binary choices. And I've had to unlearn the feminine urge to say, no, it's really unfortunate and I'm so sorry that means this for you. But it's like, I didn't make that rule up.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure we're doing this properly. It's a really tricky role, especially that COO role, where I think I had to acknowledge that I'm not pizza. I can't make everyone happy.
Sorry, can we just... I'm not pizza. I can't make
pizza.
everyone... I mean, it does. She's right.
And you could say, I'm not ice cream. It's whatever it is. Like, it's something that makes folks happy.
Yeah.
I think that the difficult masculine, feminine energy thing for me is also being the added dynamic that I work in founder-led businesses. I have done for the last decade. And so my prerogative first as GC, then as COO, has always been to be the bridge between them and the business. And between them and their executive team. And so I am necessarily the bad guy a lot of the time because they want a thing and they've hired me because they don't know how to enforce that thing. And so the feminine energy thing makes you shy away from having friction or conflict with those VPs. But the outcome I'm hired to do requires that friction, that healthy friction. And so I've had to sort of almost embrace that masculine energy a little more. It's a phrase that I really love, and I've taught a lot of women that I've worked with how to use it because it sounds a little trite when you first say it. But sometimes we do have to just sit back and ask ourselves, what would a white man do? And I do it a lot because it helps me calibrate, am I overthinking this situation? My favorite place to use it, by the way, is at the airport on a budget flight. So you know when they stage you by like zone 1, 3, whatever, and then by the end of it, you basically lose your bag to the hold. And you'll always watch a bunch of people go on there that you're like, I know for a fact you're not in that. And
I know you're not in zone 3.
I know you're not in zone 1.
Yeah.
I'm in zone 5.
Yeah.
I saw your ticket.
Yeah.
But they're wandering on and they're making it past. And so I like to play a game with myself. I'm still waiting to get caught, where I go to the airport and when they call zone 1, I stand in the queue and I just look like I belong there. I channel my inner white man and I'm just like, I belong here. And what? Take it from me.
Yeah.
And they never do.
You see?
And it's my small reminder to self that proceed until apprehended is a very real strategy in life.
Yeah.
And professionally, that masculine, feminine energy, I think for me, it's about learning what works, what doesn't work for me in my specific role.
Yeah.
Sometimes it rubs people up the wrong way. I'm happy to have conversations with people when that happens and explain why it means I'm more effective at the job I do, and to come backwards and be like, hey, it's not that I'm trying to offend you, it's that I'm not pizza, and so I'm here to serve this interest, not that one.
Right.
This is how I best do it. Tell me if that works for you. That for me has been a learning that you have to explain that part, not say sorry and try not to do it. It's explaining to people why maybe sometimes you're not pizza. You're like an onion soup instead.
With a healthy side order of audacity. But I love that idea, though, of audacity. And truthfully, I learned how to negotiate by watching men do it, right?
Absolutely.
But not all white men, but predominantly white men. Because I was on the receiving end of their negotiation tactics. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow.
That's different. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool. And when you witness from literally the front row the audacity with which how some people operate, you begin to realize that maybe you could have a go at that too.
You can always find more audacity, I think, for sure. I think there's a sort of a balance to be met between being something that is inauthentic to you. So I don't believe in Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. I think that's one of the most offensive non-feminist books ever published and sort of like lauded as feminist. It's not true. You don't need to lean in. They need to lean the fuck out. It's what can I take from the way they see the world, because it's the most unfiltered, unprejudiced way of looking at the world, right? All of our experiences are because we are women or because we're a minority or whatever it is. And so if you take the least affected by the prejudices, and that is the white man, that's not me making that up, that is how it is. And then you take the way they see the world and you don't lay over all of your anxieties, how differently would you act? And is that why they proceed to be more successful? Because they just don't have to worry about it. So I think it's a healthy mechanism to sort of check yourself and be like, am I stopping myself from living my most authentic life because I'm worried about how you'll perceive me? And would a white man be as worried? And if he wouldn't, maybe I'll try that.
Yeah.
And see what happens. It is not fail-safe. I will caveat that. I would never go for a run at 4 a.m. There are places where I would not channel my inner white man. But sometimes I think it's healthy just to check yourself and go, am I doing this because of my lived-in experiences? And would it be different if I wasn't so worried about them?
I mean, I like to think of careers in terms of and life in terms of seasons, right? And not just in the sense of the time of year, seasons of winter, of decay, seasons of where everything's growing and things like that. Would you say that there is a season of your career that shaped you the most?
I think there are 3. The first one I think was I don't have any student debt or anything like that because I didn't believe in it. Fiscally extremely responsible. And so I worked my way through university and I paid for it at the same time. And to do that, I had a number of jobs, but the best one and the most lucrative one was being a charity door-to-door fundraiser back in the day when that was still a very large thing. You go out, you show up at people's front doorsteps from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the evening, which is wild when you think about it in the wintertime. But you show up and you knock on the door and you give them your little spiel about whichever charity you're there to speak to them about and get them to sign a direct debit for.
Hold, please. I'm starting to see where she may have developed some of this audacity, to be honest, because that is not an easy gig.
It is a shameless job. I did it for 4 years. It made bank. It was a really, really good job for me personally, I did really well doing it. And it taught me a huge amount about how people operate and what people need. And I think like sales jobs are very valuable for people, but this was like the coal face of sales. I'm showing up at your literal doorstep, unannounced, unsolicited, asking you to give me money on a regular basis on your bank card for nothing in return. That is a wild ask. And so if you can do that, I think you can pretty much do anything.
You can.
And the rejection is real. People slamming doors in your faces, calling you names, all sorts of stuff. It's very real. And actually you just stop caring, right? And so there's a huge amount of resilience. So I think that was a very formative experience for me. The second one was I retrained. I went back to university after that, went and became a lawyer because my first degree was in fine art. I fucked about for 4 years. It was great. The training contract of being a lawyer and then being in a law firm was really formative. I think partly because I didn't want to be there. I went to law school and I thought at the end of it, I'll be a lawyer. I'll go into a job. I'll earn the money that they earn. I'll be able to go to court, like, Suits or whatever everyone has watched. And it was only on the first day of university when the head of faculty came and said, okay, well, you're all more likely to win X Factor than get training contracts to become lawyers, that I realized there was a whole other process that followed an LPC, a training contract, that it was like stacked against you. And so, of course, challenge accepted. I applied for one thing to one firm. I went and got the job. I was like the first person in a really long time from that university, because it was not a good uni, to get a training contract. And so I felt this bizarre obligation to go do it. But I remember I sat on it for 2 weeks when they sent it to me in the post, which like everyone else in my class was like, why would you sit on that? That's so wild. You were like, the odds that you would get one was so small. It's like one in several hundred people get one every year. And I was like, because I don't know if this is what I want to do. And it was the first time I think I really thought about, do I want to do it? Long story short, my social conditioning from my Asian mother set in. I did it. And it taught me the value of doing things even though you don't fucking want to. So from day one, I didn't want to do it. It is a really hard gig. Showing up and being in a law firm is really, really hard. It was a top 10. It was such a difficult time. And I stuck it out. And I think that there's something there career-wise about do it even when it's hard. Do it when you don't want to. Find other ways of enjoying yourself. Build relationships with people. Make that your job, your aim. That was an interesting period. And then there was a test where I worked for 4 years. I joined as GC. I left as COO. It was a company I joined as employee 30-something and left when there was 200-something people. And pretty much every head I had hired one way or another. And I think that's a really defining sort of season of my career, because I think that's where I found all the things we've spoken up to now. It's like the most safe I felt being myself. And like that's all credit to the CEO founder there, Jeremy, who I still think is one of the best founders I've ever worked with. There's something very magical when you find your people, and when those people give you the keys to the bus and say, I trust you to drive it. The way I think about people issues, how psychologically organizations work, I was able to fail fast, learn fast with him allowing me that. And I think that I think a test was a huge part of my sort of most important recent season, I would say. It's putting all of that in one place and saying, how do I use that to show leadership? There are still a lot of women who work there who will very vocally say that I was a really helpful influence to be able to see that women can do this job and can do it a certain way. And so that reinforcement to be like, showing up authentically has caused a bunch of women who are younger than me, that next generation piece I care so much about, to think differently about the way they show up. I think that for me was very validating and very sort of like, do more of that, even if it's hard.
And if you think about those first forays into being at the executive table, like, I mean, if I think about myself, I found it hard to take up space at first. I found it hard to admit what I didn't know. Yeah. Because I felt like if somebody found out that I didn't know something, that they might realise that I wasn't meant to be there all along or something like that, right? Yeah. Which is a very familiar feeling for lots of women. Yeah. I'm curious for you, like, what was the journey that you went on to be able to, I guess, take up the space that you now seemingly so easily take up?
I will give you that. I think it does feel easy now. So my end point is that I now feel very comfortable being exactly who I am, or taking up the space I need. And if I have to explain to someone why that is, then I'm happily do that. But I won't change who I am or how I show up. And I think it is easy to do that. And it's because I don't care if there's consequence. As in, like, if I'm not the person you want to work with or want to hang around with, you let me know. We're good. I'm far more invested in finding spaces that align relatively naturally than I ever was before. Yeah. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And, if you let me show up as I am and it's not effective or you don't like it or it doesn't gel, fire me. I don't care. That's cool. That will be to both our benefits. That's a kindness. And I think that's the end point. I think finding that place, I definitely haven't always been like this. Yeah. Definitely not. It's taken 10 very difficult years of figuring it out. I think for me, the starting point was when I went in-house for the first time. I was the sole counsel. I was the only lawyer. And so by just default, I was the only voice on a subject matter as a subject matter expert. I was 1 year qualified. In hindsight, mad that they let me do that. It worked fine, but it was mad.
You figured it out.
It was interesting, but I think the seat at the exec table thing happened in a really slow, progressive way. So it was first as a guest, like because I'm the voice on that topic. And so I felt confident speaking about that topic. And then it became more like HR started reporting into me and a bunch of other things. I was like, now I have to think more about the business and not just about my own agenda. And how do I verbalize that? And I remember a manager years and years and years ago gave me the feedback that the way I express myself can be quite direct, quite categorical, and it made me pull it all the way back for a number of years. Now I think he was in the wrong, honestly. Yeah. I think as long as what you're saying is based on like good reason, that you're serving the interests of the common goal, etc., how you express that is politics. And I don't like working in places that are like that now. I actively shy away from office politics. So I think that journey to find your voice is a tricky one. I think the other thing is about when I joined Test, for example, I worked with the 2 co-founders at the time, and I was the first sort of C-suite exec that they hired. And there was a few leaders that were sort of in their SLT, but it was a little non-functional, and they knew that's partly why I was hired. And I think the finding my voice thing, it took me a minute to figure out how I best express what it is I'm thinking. But I think that the structure that works super well for me now, that makes me feel very comfortable, is I start with the punchline. Here's the thought I have. Here's why I think it. And here is the input I'm looking for on it. And I think that voice works well for my personality type, the way I show up, the way I express myself, that kind of thing. People who work with me will say it's a learning curve because of the way that I'm so direct. I think it takes a while to work out that when I say something, it's not gospel. It's not as though I can't be moved. It's not as though I'm coming at it to challenge you. I think that that's a learning thing. And so I'm a huge subscriber to the user manual, whatever. I run one for myself. Every org I work in, I share it and I say, here are my quirks. Here's how I like to work. I like to lead out in the open. I do the same with the founders I work with. I get a briefing in the first couple of weeks. Even just taking an interest in someone's quirks, I think already breaks down the barrier. So I think it's just about human relationships, but it's also a little bit about the comfort of if I say something and it doesn't gel and it doesn't work and there's consequence. Also very good with consequence now, which is I think the bit that I wasn't okay with before. Yeah. As you said, what will you think of me if I get this wrong?
Right.
Well, now I don't really care.
Yeah.
It's nice to get feedback, but feedback is a gift, and sometimes you want to give gifts back and exchange them for cash. Not everything you say to me you're right about.
No, exactly. And it's for me to discern actually what's correct, right? I love how you frame that, and I love the permission slip that you're giving to other women to be all of who we are. But I also think if we put on the lens of leaders, we are able to be that as long as we're creating safety for the people around us,
1,000%.
right? The more authentic we are, the more consistent we actually are.
Yes.
But once I learned to create safety for myself amongst the other members of my leadership team, that's where I was able to start to admit I didn't know things and get things wrong. And that was really beautiful. So I've always made it my mission to try to carefully create safety for the people that I'm working with so that they can really see my heart. I at one time said Bloom was for women with brains, heart and spirit, because it kind of is, right? Yeah. It's like, yes, you're intelligent, but yes, you also have a big heart. And yes, you also have a whole lot of spirit, right? It's as long as people can see all of those things, but the heart bit is really important because then people know where they stand with you, right? How have you made sure that people can feel your heart when leading?
I think there's 2 things. One is that I always make sure that the founder that I'm working with, when I'm interviewing, and I'm doing that 2-way interview thing of interviewing them, I don't care about industry. I don't care about a lot of things like bare thresholds on whether it will or won't die in the next year, that kind of thing. The thing I truly care about is their heart in the right place. They might be getting lots of stuff wrong. Their current way of working may be totally all over the place. But when I speak to you and I ask you about different aspects of how you run a business, is your heart in the right place? Because I think when that is true, everything else is easy. So the first thing for me is finding a match with the person from whom it all flows in a founder-led organization. I can then slot in relatively easily, deliver on their agenda and show people where my heart is because it's already sort of aligned with where theirs is. I think they're showing people where your heart is. I think it's the kindness over niceness. If I have lipstick on my mouth or my teeth, tell me, and I will always tell you. It's the leading very out in the open. So I default to a very extreme state to transparency. If I have questions about your competence or the way in which you're working or whatever it is, whether you are in my team or not, I'm very happy to sit down and talk with anybody about it. And I'm also very happy for them the same thing to me. I always say to people up front, I'm impossible to offend because I am. I find it really hard to be offended.
I mean, I've tried. I've really tried, gang.
You still continue to try. I like to explain to people that who I am is not what I do, and what I do is not who I am. So as a person, my value center is not based on my work. I care very deeply about my job. And I was saying to you just before we started recording, I've got a call with the CEO of the company I'm at tonight at 9 p.m. And I scheduled that because I care very deeply about what I do. So I'm not saying it's a 9 to 5. I'm not who I am. It's that my identity is not intrinsically linked to my professional ideas. And so showing people where your heart is, I think, is a bit about saying, like, I'm happy to do whatever as long as we've identified the common interest, and that you and I are not speaking about our personal positions. We're talking about the interest we're serving. And then we're trying to move in that direction, because I think it makes conflict easier. It means you can assume good intent from my part, because, I'm not trying to change your position. Say you support Manchester United, for argument's sake, and I support Liverpool. We could literally debate until we're blue in the face. None of us is going to change our position, right? We've done that for 20 years. I could give you all the facts about how often your team loses and mine wins. You're not going to change your mind. Whereas if I say we both serve the interest of we love football, there happens to be a game where your team and my team are playing, now we can go and watch that and we can both enjoy it equally. So we've served the interest without having to resolve the positional problem. And so personal agendas, I think, are very dangerous. And so I always try to make clear to people that I obviously have personal ambitions and I have personal values, and I happily debate those any day. The thing I do not have is a personal agenda at work. That's a privilege of my job in a way, because that sort of COO-y job allows me to deliver other people's agendas and measure them against each other. I think that that's a unique privilege, but it also means it makes it easy to lead people in a way that's like, look, it doesn't, to me, necessarily matter personally what the outcome is. It matters that it achieves the outcome that we agree is the most important one in the optimal way. And unless you can convince me that your way of doing it is better than these other 5 ways, I'm going to go ahead and say it's not that way we should do it. It's very easy to lead in a sort of heartfelt way when the way you're doing it is more about what is the thing we're trying to do.
Yeah.
The other thing worth saying, I think, is like doing the right thing when it's really hard. Like if someone's not performing, I've never found it very difficult to have conversations where we exit people, for example. People find that really hard. When people say to me, like, oh my God, you spend so much of your professional life exiting people. Is that not sort of soul destroying? I always say I think it's a real privilege to be the person who gets to be in the room when that message is delivered, because it's not about me. If I stand there and say, I'm really nervous or I'm really upset or that was a really upsetting meeting, it's like a very strange thing to me, because like that was not about you.
Yeah.
That person just lost their job. How is it about you?
Yeah.
And that to me is like, it's the privilege, and it's showing people that the moments where they need to be centered are about them. And like, yes, I expect people to work hard, and yes, I expect you to show up and do all of the things right, etc. But if you're telling me that you're having a hard time, you just need a minute, like this is too difficult, someone just died, whatever it is, like applying the maximum amount of humanity that you can, I think it builds so much goodwill in the bank that everything else is easy. Yeah. So I think it's just how you show up, like be really consistent.
Yeah.
Not, I'm following a policy. It's like, no. We're consistent. We're human, first and foremost.
To your point, like we can be delivering bad news and still have a great relationship.
Absolutely.
I was a recruiter for many, many years, and the amount of people that didn't get the job that I was hiring for, that are still thriving in my network today and actually coming to me as clients now isn't even funny, just because you lead with humanity in those situations, and then you build trust with them because you're as transparent as you can possibly be. There's something else there that you said that I do want to pick up on, because it's something that many women are struggling with, women in leadership in particular, is around this idea of burnout, right? You mentioned a call at 9 o'clock, I've got to say. I love that you work your hours and you choose when you're going to, like, that's great. There is a big problem for women in leadership roles in particular, jumping from burnout to burnout to burnout. Even in your own career, you came up as a lawyer. I'm going to assume you work crazy hours. What's your own journey with that been? And how have you managed to really structure your life in a way where you get to thrive in the heart of it?
I think there's like one very famous proponent of trying to knock down this wording of work-life balance, and it's Jeff Bezos. He talks about work-life balance being not the correct way of thinking about it, because that's a trade-off. That is very hard to make, considering that you spend the majority of your waking hours at work, and so you're necessarily already compromising. And so that's like a very bad starting point, and I very much subscribe to this idea. I don't believe in work-life balance. I think that what I choose to do with my work needs to be aligned with the thing that I would want to be doing at this moment in time. Because I think burnout is the result of 2 things. It's a lack of agency and it's a lack of purpose. If you're a person with a sort of normalish startup job, for example, and you start your day at say 9 or 10, which is what many of us do, and then you end your day sometimes at 5, sometimes at 7, sometimes at 11, sometimes you work the weekend, sometimes you don't, work-life balance quickly becomes a very messy thing. And if you're constantly resentful that I'm giving this hour after 6 to my job instead of to myself, that makes it very difficult because you're negotiating with yourself. Like, no one is telling you have to do that. I found it most difficult working at the law firm because that to me didn't align with what I enjoyed doing, the way I enjoyed doing it. And so, you have to do a lot of soul searching to know what you would spend your time on anyway, where you spike, the things you love, like know thyself, and then find a job that aligns with it very deeply.
Yes.
So many ways to spend your life. I could run a B&B in the Philippines on an island and be a surf instructor and I'd be just as happy. I know that for a fact, but I'm choosing to be here. And I think that that's the thing to do. It's agency and its purpose. And I think that the burnout problem is more around being able to monitor when you think you're taking on too much, having good boundaries and being able to say, actually, that doesn't align with the purpose which I think I should serve. I, for example, am a person, I plan holidays on a spreadsheet. I write my shopping list in the order in which I mentally know the things appear in the supermarket because I love efficiency. I love structure, frameworks that make my life easier and simpler and like less sort of cognitively intense. And I like designing them and I get a deep amount of pleasure out of it. So when someone says to me, can you do this thing on Saturday? It would change the life of one person on Monday. Absolutely, it's what I'm going to want to do because I want to do it. And I think that's the difference is do you need to do it? Do you have to do it? Do you want to do it? And being able to say no if it really matters. Agency, right? And I think that's my journey with burnout is understanding that it all starts with the prep. 80% of it is prep, knowing who you are and then finding a workplace where you can be that and live your own values in that way, I think is the right thing to do. And if that means you're a gardener in the Cotswolds versus a people officer somewhere, everything is a choice. And if you're burnt out, you have to think about what did you do to contribute to being there because it's not your employer's fault.
No, and that's it. I mean, I have to say, the work I do today sets my soul on fire.
There we go.
Right? I am working in a fully aligned way.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually feel like work.
Exactly.
It's fantastic in every way. But I also see, because I am a coach, when if I just leave this thing, then it will get better. And if I just do this one thing, and it will get better. And it will just, and it's this self-abandonment. And we don't do it on purpose, but we don't know quite who we are. We don't know really what lights us up. We don't know what our values are. So we're constantly in this sort of slightly dodgy place of being out of alignment. We don't know what our boundaries are. We don't know what's good for us or wrong for us. So all I would say to anybody watching or listening to this is that whatever you can do to get to know yourself better again, and I start that with values with everybody that I work with, because it's a really great way of just figuring that.
I've got your worksheet. I have filled it in. I have used it. Yes.
So I start with values every time. I'll put it in the notes.
Yes.
Figuring out your values, first of all, as the starting point. But then there are so many different ways that you can just begin to just tap into a little bit more about what lights me up. Like Emily, you loved it, like a spreadsheet. You know, like
I do love a
the end of the
spreadsheet.
day, what gave me energy, what drained my energy. Do it for a week.
I've actually got a template if you want it.
Oh my
Send
gosh.
it to you.
Anything that you can do to map this stuff in yourself, you will, with a little bit of structure, set yourself free, right?
Yes, I think
that's
so.
it. Like, we need a little bit of structure to set ourselves free. Even, I mean, obviously, Emily's like super far on the scale of structure.
Love it. Yeah.
Some of us aren't that far on the scale, but I have to say, before order, there was chaos for me. So I need structure to thrive personally, and I think lots of us are like that.
I think most people require some amount of boundary for themselves. And I
Yeah.
think that that's just, you have to find which version works for you. I think that spreadsheet version works for me. You know, lots of soul searching and going on yoga retreats works for other people.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is, I think we're all built different. We all have different traumas. How do you use all that trauma sort of as like to turn it into positive energy?
Yeah.
And it's like there is a reason I am the way I am. It's my upbringing. It's like all of the difficult things that I've faced in my life so far, and I've turned them into things that are productive and helpful. And I think that if people can do that, and again, it's like agency. You choose how happy you are.
Yeah.
And I think it's what can you do for yourself to make yourself more happy. And I think the other thing that I would urge people to think about if they're in that sort of transitional phase, and I talk about this a lot with women that are sort of similar age to me, taking time off work, not sure what they want to do. It's one, okay not to know. That's really important. Sometimes it's really helpful not to have a plan. And the other thing is that there is something for you that will set your soul on fire. When you find it is a question, you can control the parameters of that to some degree through some deliberate work, like values work, DNO exercises, that kind of stuff. People stay in jobs that they're not happy in or feel burnt out in because they feel, well, what else would I do? What if you thought about it more like a privilege?
Yeah.
How lucky you are that there are so many choices available for you.
Yeah.
If you weren't doing what you're doing, what could you get to do? And then it suddenly reframes a lot of the way you think about it. And the thing I would urge people to understand is that there is a Narnia for you somewhere where like all of your alignment comes together, where your values match with the people you work with, where you love what you do, you don't get the Sunday scaries, you think about work on a Saturday but in a good way.
Yeah.
Those places absolutely exist. I never thought they did, but they do.
They do.
And I've lived
They really
there
do.
and it was wonderful, and I left and I'm still happy. I think the belief that they exist often is the barrier to people really putting the work in, because like, what's the point?
Yeah.
But I would really urge people to know that that is in fact true and it does exist. It's just about finding what it is, and you won't know if you don't do the work. It's like the onus is on you at this point.
Okay, one final thing for you, my friend.
Aye.
If there was just one thing that you wish you'd learned sooner in your career, what would that be?
Proceed until apprehended. Honestly, it's my favorite phrase. It's not the same as ask forgiveness, not permission. You're still asking someone for some validation. For me, the proceed until apprehended is if you've been rigorous and you've really thought about the choice you're making or the action you're about to take or the words you're about to say to someone, and you're confident that you're doing the best you can with what you've got in the circumstances, proceed until apprehended. I think that there is a huge power in doing that. Personally, professionally, I've had a really fortunate trajectory in that I became a GC at only 4 years qualified, which is pretty unusual. I'm a COO at a relatively young age. I get trusted with quite a lot of responsibility and autonomy, and it's like a really wonderful place to be. 1,000% wouldn't be here without the mindset proceed until apprehended. And there are some people I've written about this on my Substack who I credit that with. That is not my phrase, but there is a huge amount of power in just internalizing proceed until apprehended as an approach. Like, I'm just going to do this, and as long as I can explain how I got here and that it was reasonable, I back myself if there's consequences.
Yeah, I love that. Proceed until apprehended.
Indeed. Very visual.
And my darling, you are amazing. Thank you for bringing all of your awesomeness to us today with all of your wisdom and all of your light. I truly appreciate you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to listen to all of this in this series.
Thank you for being here. If you have liked this episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear some of what we were talking about. Go and check out our other episodes, and then also head over to ourtimetobloom.com to find out more about Bloom and how you can get involved.